Okay, a week or so ago we had the Geneva Watch Days 2021. It doesn't seem to have got that much coverage in the media, which I think is unfortunate because I think it's by far the most interesting watch show that we've had this year. Way better than the earlier Watches and Wonders. Not a huge number of brands, not the biggest brands that make the biggest splash, but they're the ones like Breitling, Bulgari, Moser that are doing interesting things. And yeah, so I think it's a shame that it probably hasn't got the coverage it should. I'm going to not do one big video. I'm going to probably do a couple of videos talking about what were my favourite watches from that time. And I'm going to start today with Breitling. So we'll get into what it is that Breitling released in in Geneva Watch Days 2021. First off, we'll start with Breitling, and they have brought us a whole new collection, the Top Time collection. Some of you are going to be saying, what the hell? What are you talking about, Pete? The Top Times have been around for a while. Yes, they have, but up until very recently, and I think the release of these watches, the Top Times have been one or two watches buried inside, I'm going to say, the Premier line. But now, if you go to the website, they've been dragged out and are a collection of their own, which I think is interesting. And I do particularly like the fact, or I'm interested in the fact, that Breitling don't seem to have made a big deal about that. I can't see in any of their press releases any discussion about the fact that the Top Time has been made a collection all of its own, which says something to me about what they want to focus on and what they don't. But having said that, now let's just talk about the three watches that they've given us. The three watches, three chronographs, all based on an ETA with a Dupuis de Bois module over the top, comes in green, red and blue. The green is associated with the Ford Mustang, the red is associated with the Corvette Stingray, and the blue is associated with the Shelby Cobra. I do find it interesting that in this one collection they've captured really the hot color of about 4 years ago, the hot color of probably the last 2 years, and what I believe to be the big hot color of probably 2022 and beyond. That is blue for the old stuff, green for about now, and red for the future. The green and the reds are 42 millimeters. The blue in with the two registers is 40 millimeters. They're all coming in at around about 7,500 Australian dollars, and these watches perfectly capture what it is Breitling is trying to do. Whether you like the watches or not, and that's always something of a personal choice, I think it is interesting always to think, how well is the watch achieving what the company's trying to do? And in this case, these watches absolutely nails everything Breitling's trying to do right now. That last statement obviously begs the question, well, what is Breitling trying to achieve? Breitling's trying to achieve three things. One, it's trying to take us back to the glory years of Breitling during the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, when they were on top of the pile. They're also trying to tap into what they see, what George Kern sees, as this idea of new luxury or inclusive luxury. And then finally, they're trying to achieve hyper presence, be constantly in the news, constantly in front of the media. Why? The first one, talking about taking us back to the glory years, is obvious. They're getting away from this strict aviation, strict kind of hyper masculine look of watches, and they're moving into something which is traditionally much more what Breitling has been, a much broader company with a very broad and inclusive range of watches with lots of entry points. What do we mean by this new or inclusive luxury? What it means is being a little bit less starchy, a little bit less formal, a little bit less exclusive. It's about enjoying the watch because the watch makes you happy, not because the watch causes others pain, because they want what you have. This is about a watch that is for you, not for you to show other people that you have. This is a watch for people who are probably never going to say the word horology or look all poo-faced when someone brings out a new colour. This is a watch for people who simply enjoy watches and themselves. And finally, what do we mean by hyper-presence? Well, the first 2 points, Breitling is trying to institute change. Breitling is trying to change themselves and people's perception of who they are. A long time ago, I actually got involved in politics and did some media training for that. And I once got told about the importance of being on message and always out there with the same message. It's this idea of hyper-presence. What I was told was, if you get to the point where if you think that if you say this message one more time, you will be physically ill on the podium, then your audience is just beginning to hear it. And what George Kern is trying to do with hyperpresence is tap into that truism. He's trying to make sure that every couple of months there is something in the news about Breitling. And what they're doing here in particular is that is why these watches are what they call a capsule collection. They're only available for a short period of time. I think they've said 1 year. The idea being they come on, Breitling don't have to overinvest. They don't have to build up massive great inventories. They're just not going to be hanging around in the catalogue for years and years and years, clogging it up. It's going to come out, be strong in the media, have a big song and dance made about it, be available for a year, and then go and create room for the next release and the next release. And this is a common strategy and a really smart strategy for Breitling to try and change people's view of them. As a Breitling fan, I watch what they do really closely. I'm also aware that most people don't, which is why I'm aware that 90% of things that people say about Breitling are generally the Breitling of 5, 6, 7, even 10 years ago. People are still saying Breitling is all over the place and available at 40% off at Joma Shop. That hasn't been true for over a year, but people don't get the message. And George Kearns knows this. This whole idea of hyper-presence, constant release, is all about getting past that and getting people to pay attention. And in this way, these watches achieve all of those three things. Clearly retro inspired. Clearly they're aligning themselves with cars of the mid 60s. By doing so, they're dragging us back to those times. They are fun, they are casual, they're not particularly expensive. So in that, these watches are sort of tapping into this idea of new or inclusive luxury. And as I said, as capsule releases, which are only going to be around for a little while, they certainly tap into and facilitate the hyper presence that George Kern and Breitling are after here. Okay, so having spoken about all the background and the industry stuff, what do I think of the new Top Times? I quite like them, but I'll cut to the end and say I'm unlikely to buy one. So why do I like them? I like the case. I like the Top Time case. It is simple, but having tried the other two Top Times and seen them in the metal, it's beautifully made, beautifully finished, wonderfully proportioned, incredibly comfortable. And so the case is great. I love that it's 100 meter water resistance, but does not have screw down pushers. No chronograph should have screw down pushers, and it just wouldn't work with this idea of being casual and fun, having to then do all the faffing about that would mean. I think the colours again fit the brief. Then they're a little bit bright for me personally. They're a little bit too close to, a little bit too shouty. But I think for what they're trying to achieve, those brilliant bold colours, particularly on the green and the red, matched with that sort of rev counter like orange, yellow, and then black on the tachymeter scale is just perfect. It really captures that sense that they're going for. And that sense that they're going for, whether it is the bright colors, whether it is the associations with the car companies, whether it is, as I say, that sort of rev counter replication on the tachymeter, is I think they're going for that scent, or I should say the stamped metal feel of the registers. They're really tapping into the sense of freedom that cars gave people during the 60s. That sense of change and direction and a new generation that the muscle cars inspired and were for people of that time. I think that's what these watches are trying to grab. A lot of people have said, why would you buy one of these if you didn't want the car? In a sense, the cars, whether it's the Cobra, the Mustang, or the Stingray, are kind of, I hate to say it, they're kind of irrelevant here. It's not the car, it's the message the car brings. The message of freedom, of high performance, of just being fun, of all of that unleashing. That is what these watches are trying to bring across. And I think they do it really well. So I think that they're perfectly well-designed watches and achieve what they want to. I'm unlikely to buy one because the colours are just a little bit shouty for me. And yeah, that's really about it. I think if they'd gone for something a little bit different, the overall design I quite like. But for me, the colours are just a bit too bold, a bit too out there. And that probably says more about me than the watches. So anyway, that's my hot take on what we've seen at a Breitling at Geneva Watch Days 2021. So that was it. That was my take on the Breitlings that came out at Geneva Watch Days. Tomorrow I'll follow it up. I'll stick with the bees and I'll go with Bulgari. See you then. Bye.